À l'ordre, à ce moment-ci,
Order.
38 du règlement, une motion portant ajournement de la Chambre.
Pursuant to Standing Order 38, a motion to adjourn the House is now deemed to have been moved. Accordingly, the question is as follows, that this House do now adjourn.
Elmwood Transcona.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'm pleased to rise to follow up on some matters that I raised in question period in the fall of last year. At that time, there was a rotating strike on by CUPW members at Canada Post. And in the context of that rotating strike, Madam Speaker, and this is prior to back-to-work legislation being introduced and passed, the corporation, Canada Post, made a decision that while workers were out on the rotating strike, which means they were just missing a few days, in the roughly month that they were out, workers in any particular city were only missing a few days of work. They were being paid for the days that they were working, but the members who were not working because they were on short-term disability were deprived of their benefits, Madam Speaker. I think it was a mean-spirited decision taken by Canada Post. It was a tactic and an ugly tactic at that in order to try and put pressure on the union, Madam Speaker, and really not fair at all. And so I'm wondering for members of the government and whoever it is exactly that's going to get up to answer this question, Madam Speaker, I mean, I'm wondering how many postal workers showed up to work on their campaign. I know there were a lot of postal workers that went out to work on the campaigns of Liberal MPs who believed, because Liberals during the campaign were telling them that they had their back, and were very disappointed when this all came to a head to see even the issues. I mean, they weren't impressed with the back-to-work legislation, but something that was clearly under the prerogative of the Liberal government to tell Canada Post to cease and desist on a decision they made that they could also have chosen not to make. They could have chosen to continue on with the short-term disability benefit payments as well. Not just on a case-by-case basis, not on a compassionate basis, where somebody who's sick and injured at home and is already dealing with a substantial amount of stress and financial hardship, both because they've been on a reduced salary and now are not collecting salary while they apply for on those compassionate grounds. They didn't have to do it that way, Madam Speaker. They could have just said that as a matter of policy that we're going to continue to pay those short-term disability benefits. And the fact that they didn't meant that those people that were already sick and injured at home had to suffer having no salary, while their colleagues who were able to work, and because it was not a full strike, were still largely getting paid, Madam Speaker. And so I never did get a satisfactory answer from this government on why they did that, why they didn't choose the high road and decide to continue to make those short-term disability payments as a matter of course instead of on an exceptional basis for only some of the people who needed those benefits. And I wonder what government members say to postal workers in their riding who came out and campaigned for them in 2015 when they come to them and express disappointment and anger at the fact that their sick and injured coworkers who had to stay home went without that money. The other thing that they could have done was make those workers whole after they legislated their colleagues back to work, and they didn't do that either. And we're still wanting to know why, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Services and Supply. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Obviously, there were a lot of questions about Canada Post during the last campaign, and we promised to take the Harper plan and scrap it, and then come up with a new plan. And we consulted broadly across the country, including postal workers, and we came up with a good plan, a forward-looking, future-looking plan that respects Canada Post workers.
Employees are entitled to in the event of a strike. It's an unfortunate fact, Madam Speaker, that during a strike, some of the benefits Canada Post employees receive could have been affected because the collective agreement was expired. However, this would not be true for all benefits. For example, during a strike, employees could continue to have prescription drugs covered. Moreover, during the strike action that took place in November 2018, Canada Post put in place a mechanism to make it possible for employees to request an exemption from any denial of benefits on compassionate grounds. I would like to also add that employees continued to keep their EI benefits, such as maternity and parental benefits, during the strike.
Madam Speaker, though the workers are back on the job, bargaining is still underway in an effort to reach a final agreement. Our government has urged both sides to remain at the table for over a year now. We believe that respectful dialogue between both parties is the best path towards a fair deal. Last year, with bargaining at a standstill and weeks of rotating strikes all over Canada, things came to a head. Jobs were in jeopardy, the well-being of the most vulnerable Canadians was in danger, and our economy was at risk.
It's our job to do what's right for Canadians, and that's precisely what we did when we introduced and passed Bill C-89, which got Canada Post back to work on November 27, 2018, while setting out a process for continuing negotiations with an independent mediator arbitrator. Madam Speaker, I'm confident that Canada Post values its relationship with the union, and certainly that is something that we have encouraged the new management and the new board to pursue, and I am encouraged that they have been able to find common ground on many issues. Moreover, I know that Canada Post values its relationship with Canadians, who more than ever depend on them to deliver. Both sides of this dispute are working hard to resolve these issues, and Madam Speaker, the arbitration process outlined under Bill C-89 officially began on January 16th of this year. As the Minister of Labour said when tabling Bill C-89, this was a last resort, something that our government had done everything in its power to avoid. While we did not take the decision lightly, we acted as we always do, with the best interests of all Canadians in mind.
From members of Parliament, Canadians should expect no less. Our goal has always been to restore necessary services to Canadians immediately and to encourage the parties to find common ground over the longer term. Thank you.
The honourable member for Elmwood-Transcona.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. And I think the member knows that we disagree about back-to-work legislation and we disagree about the government's characterization of the strike. But I want to focus in particularly on the issue of short-term disability benefits. The question isn't whether the collective agreement expired or not. I don't think that's the interesting question. The interesting question is whether there was anything prohibiting Canada Post by acting in good faith and continuing those short-term disability benefits. So the expiration of the collective agreement doesn't require that they discontinue those benefits. It made it an option. And so will the member just stand up and admit that Canada Post had the option, and the minister had the option to direct Canada Post to continue those benefits, notwithstanding the fact that the collective agreement was deemed to have expired?
The honourable parliamentary secretary.
Madam Speaker, look, labour negotiations, unfortunately, are very difficult and certainly appear to have been, in this case, sometimes messy. The operational decisions of Canada Post are generally not something that the minister or the government interfere in. Our role, both legislated and on a day-to-day basis, is to name the CEO and the board of Canada Post and to approve its general business plan, all of course in accordance with its governing legislation. That's a job we take very seriously. We have, of course, encouraged them to pursue a more meaningful dialogue and to meaningfully improve the labor management situation in the corporation. That is something we are reassured that they are continuing to do, and we all look forward to the conclusion of this matter. Thank you.
The motion to adjourn the House is now deemed to have been adopted. Accordingly, this House stands adjourned until tomorrow at 10 a.m. pursuant to Standing Order 24-1.